You think you know exactly which seed is going to turn into a mighty oak, but really, you really have no idea. And so you got to plant a lot of acorns to get a very few oaks. And I wish I could tell you that there's a way to, okay, here's 500 acorns. These are the 5 that will become trees. There's no way. You just got to plant 500 and, pray.
Yeah.
And I think that is true with many things. And you got to plant a lot of seeds.
Hey, Guy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Let's roll.
It's nice to see you. I feel like I've been stalking you on LinkedIn for way too long, and now we finally get to meet you as well. I love the vibe, by the way, in your studio. It feels very warm and homely, if that makes sense. I really appreciate it. It's kind of the opposite of mine, which is kind of very corporate and cold. So I need to bring a bit of warmth.
I spent weeks and weeks setting up the shelf and trying the books and the lights and, do I go hot or cold or do I put curtains up? I mean, I spent weeks and weeks doing this and then I turn on this and I see that you have 8 cameras. So you have 8 times the cameras that I do. So I have camera envy now.
Yeah, no worries. Definitely not a competitive advantage, really. It's more of a hindrance, to be honest, because now I have to worry about 8 cameras being in focus. Are they working properly? I've actually probably caused myself more of a headache than everything else. I know that first and foremost, I've been following work for years, so it's really great to have you on the show. Super excited to talk about your new book, Think Remarkable: 9 Paths to Transform Your Life and Make a Difference. It's right here on the table, actually, in front of me. Many of our audience are perhaps aware of you, but tell us about the inspiration about this new book. Why now? Why this topic? What was it that got you excited about this?
I got a big advance from Wiley.
That's the secret. Hey, please write another book. You're like, all right, what about... just don't tell them. Just don't tell them you wrote it.
You can't say I'm not honest.
Yeah, just don't tell them you wrote it in ChatGPT. Just don't tell them that, because they'll be pretty upset.
Unfortunately, that book was written right before ChatGPT happened. But yeah, that's a whole different discussion. But
yeah.
Okay, so a more serious and professional answer is that I have this podcast called Remarkable People.
Yes.
And, I truly do have remarkable people like Jane Goodall, Steve Wozniak, Margaret Atwood, Stacey Abrams, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Stephen Wolfram, Angela Duckworth, Carol Dweck. And then I figured out that after 5 years, I have 250 hours of podcasts and 5,000 pages of transcripts, and no one's going to read or listen to all that. So it was, I think, like my moral obligation to reduce that into a bite-sized thing called Think Remarkable.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll have to ask your advice after this then, because that's something I really want to do in the future with our show. After, I've got literally 1,000 episodes of interviewing the world's top chief people officers. And one of my goals in the future is to write a book based on all of those insights and perspectives. So I'll have to tap you up after the show.
I listen, I've been to this rodeo before. In fact, I've been to 17 rodeos now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, man, well, this is a very good HR lesson. I think one of the most important things that a company can do is they work backwards from the customer, right? So it's what does your customer need, not what you like to do or have to do or been doing or been making money doing or getting advances for doing. And I would make the case that if you work backwards from the people who have been your traditional readers, that all they want is information. They want questions answered. And so rather than working forward, that I'm an author, I write books, you should work backwards, which is what do they want? And if you work backwards, it may be that they would rather have a custom LLM with your knowledge in it and the knowledge of, 1,200 episodes.
This is what we did.
Then they want a book.
Well, to that point, that's what we did. And to that point, but I feel like there's, you're right. I didn't even think about because I thought there's probably no need to then do that now, because we built Atlas Copilot for the exact reason. They can query, they can ask questions, based on, I saw someone ask recently, what are the top key attributes and, soft and hard skills I need to be a CHRO based on this content, and it was very clear answer and defined. So maybe you're right. Maybe the medium's changed, and I don't need a book.
Like people like me and you, we're looking for great examples. Like, okay, Kodak like stuck to film. They should have gone digital. Blockbuster should have been Netflix. There's example of people who they couldn't adapt to the new needs of customers. And I think if we're really smart, we should apply that to ourselves. And I'm trying to, which is to say, should I write another book, or should I, have the world's best LLM?
Yeah.
It's a good question these days.
It kind of got to the point for us, and I tried building this about 5 years ago, before large language models, before OpenAI. I spent a lot of money, didn't get very far, but the idea was, hey, we've got 10,000 hours of insights and perspectives from both our podcasts and events. Like, how do I give our audience instant answers to their queries? And I was like, AI, large language, is going to be able to help me do that as well. And then, of course, 2 years later, ChatGPT and OpenAI launches. I'm like, wow, I was a bit early in the thinking of that, and we were one of the first products to the market in the HR. Well, actually, we were the first co-pilot for HR to the market, because I'd already been mapping it out for years and years beforehand as well. But I'll be honest, back then, I think 5 years ago when I started talking about this, people kind of looked at me in a strange way when I said this is, they were like, what do you mean? So I want to jump into the book. So you start the book with Apple's Think Different campaign. What was it about that campaign that you felt that really sort of captured the essence of becoming remarkable, which is obviously what you talk about in the book?
I have to take your listeners back in time. So this was about 1997. And believe it or not, in 1997, most people thought Apple would die. Michael Dell has this famous comment when he was asked, what should Apple do? He said, give back the money to the shareholders and close the company, right? So now you have to put yourself, that's what it was like. It's not the, $2 or $3 or $5 trillion company that it is today. And so back then, if you used a Macintosh, you truly had to be thinking different, because most of the world was using Windows and, IBM PCs and stuff like that. And so this ad campaign was about how, if you want to be like Picasso or Richard Branson or, Albert Einstein, you need to think different and don't think like the crowd. And at the time, that truly appealed to Macintosh users.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I remember first sitting down and using the operating system, and it was so foreign, even down to the way that the mouse worked, where it was very different, because the first ever mouse that was created in that way, and it took a while for me to reset from being a PC user. Completely reimagined the experience, which is very brave, which is why a lot of people thought it wouldn't work.
Well, in a sense, it's kind of like, because I think a lot of your listeners probably like wondering, what the hell are they talking about? I think if you have been driving a car that's running on gas all your life, and you go and you get an electric car, it's a whole different world, right? You got to think completely differently about charging and what you're doing and how it works, and how come it's not noisy, and all these things. And I think the adjustment to an electric car is roughly equal to the adjustment to Macintosh if you were used to using MS-DOS or an Apple II.
Yeah, I agree. And I also did make that move to a Tesla not long ago. And, the regenerative braking, the operating system, everything, you're like, it's the same.
There's no knobs.
Nothing. No, yeah, exactly, right. It's just one screen. You're like, where's everything? Where's the air conditioning? So how do we translate that think different into an organization, though, practically? What does that look like? What is required based on those conversations you had to be able to, because you're having to rip up a lot of red tape. having to challenge the status quo, and it's going to be uncomfortable.
Well, I think that, one should learn from the lessons, and I kind of mentioned them already, but, does your company want to be Blockbuster and not exist? Do you want to be Kodak, which kind of exists? Do you want to be a mini computer company? Or, I mean, even worse, do you want to be a typewriter company, right? So, I mean, I hope people even know what a typewriter is. So I think that, if you don't have an attitude that we're going to work backwards from the customer and we're going to like redefine what we do. So, if you're Kodak, if you define yourself as a chemical company, you don't embrace digital photography. But the irony of this is that in 1975, an engineer in Kodak invented a digital camera, the first digital camera. But I think Kodak was thinking, we're a chemical company. We're not an electronics company. And so they didn't embrace digital photography. And that's why Kodak is gone.
Yeah. You mentioned being remarkable shouldn't be the primary goal, but rather a natural outcome. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so, I think that there's this like market and customer base for self-help books. And I gotta tell you, I have very mixed emotions about self-help books, because a lot of them is like, somebody's trying to say, well, you can be great, you can be remarkable, and read my book and then come to my $5,000 seminar at the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay, and over 48 hours, I'm going to teach you how to be remarkable for $5,000. And I'm just not one of those self-help gurus. And I think that if you tell people, well, the goal is to be remarkable. So, this is how you position yourself as remarkable. You get on TEDx, you write white papers, your social media is always pushing your agenda, et cetera, et cetera. So you position yourself as being remarkable. I cannot imagine that that's what truly remarkable people do. What truly remarkable people do is they make the world a better place. And when you make the world a better place, guess what? The world thinks you're remarkable. So I refuse to believe that Jane Goodall sits around and says, how do I get the people of the world to think that I am remarkable? I mean, yeah, and I guarantee you, Steve Jobs never sat around saying, how can I convince people that I'm innovative? What should I do? What PR firm, what executive coach can I hire? He made a freaking Macintosh, an iPhone, iPod, iPad, Apple Store, Genius Bar, App Store. Guess what? If you do all that, people think you're remarkable. Whoa.
Yeah. Well, do you think, though, that there has to be a blend now, though, because you have these remarkable people that are doing those things, but it feels like if you don't have that online presence, you almost don't exist in this day and age. So, there is a balance to that, right? I do agree with your point, though. There's a lot of people with these amazing LinkedIn profiles, and they're claiming to do all these things, and they're actually not doing any of those things that they're doing, and vice versa. I meet some incredible leaders and people that are doing a remarkable work that you've never heard of, because they have zero online presence, and therefore no one knows they exist. So it's kind of like an interesting, because you have a great online presence, right? So clearly, you do. I mean, you might not say great, but you have a prominent online presence. So there is value in that, right?
There is value in that, but let me just say that if you were going to assign your focus and your energy to doing remarkable stuff versus telling people you're doing remarkable stuff,
I agree.
I would say you put about 80% of your effort into doing remarkable stuff and 20% into positioning yourself as a remarkable person.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think the first sort of 10 years of my career, I had zero online presence, and I was just in the dark grinding, doing the work, and then kind of with the podcast that came in the second half. I've been doing this around 20 years, and I was like, I have all these incredible people in my network. I want to tell their story. How do I do it? And this was the medium I chose. So for me, this is similar to you. This was my way of sharing the remarkable work that I saw HR leaders were doing. So I was like, and there wasn't anything that existed in a platform. I was like, wow, like all of this amazing work's happening in all of these organizations, and no one's talking about it specifically in the HR space. And that's kind of where this show came from. So it was like during my journey to and from work, I would listen to podcasts like yours and others, and I'd be like, oh, this is a good medium to be able to I didn't think we'll be here where we are now. We started off very much as a hobby in my bedroom, so it's come a long way. Well, one of the things I'm really excited to talk to you about is growth mindset. You know, chapter 1 covers the growth mindset and your personal journey with it. I know you've taken up new challenges like surfing and hockey later in life. What advice would you give to people struggling with maybe a fixed mindset, let's say?
Well, first of all, if I can go and recommend another person's book, which is The Truest Form of Flattery, when an author tells you to read somebody else's book, not his book. So you need to read the book called Mindset by Carol Dweck,
yes.
Dweck. And she is the mother of the growth mindset. And basically she says there's 2 kinds of mindsets. There's the growth mindset where you believe you can learn new things and do new things and, achieve new things. And there's a fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset says, I cannot learn surfing. I'm too old. I cannot learn hockey. I'm too old. I cannot learn to use AI. I'm too old. That's a fixed mindset. And there's one more kind of fixed mindset that HR people should be aware of. The fixed mindset that says, I am perfect. I don't need to learn anything more. And that really is sickening. But anyway, and then the third thing I would tell you, the HR listener, is that, Carol Dweck focused on the growth mindset, which is between your temples, right? It's in your head. I believe I can grow. I believe I can do new things. And then she had a protege named Carol Murphy. And Carol Murphy, I think, just took Carol Dweck's work. Excuse me, it's Mary Murphy, and just expanded Carol Dweck's impact, because what her observation was that you have to have a growth mindset in your head, but you need to be working in a growth mindset organization. Because if you have a growth mindset in your head, but you're working for a fixed mindset organization, it ain't going to work. You need to be in an environment that supports the growth mindset. And that's what HR people need to do.
Yeah. How do we do that? How do we move people from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset and create that environment?
Well, I think that environment, you have to focus on skills as opposed to proxies, like what school did you go to, or, what company did you work for? Because I got to tell you, just because you went to Yale or Harvard or Stanford, that doesn't mean you have the skill set. It just means that, well, it probably means that you come from a rich family and they had tutors and SAT tutors and, essay writer tutors. So the one thing is you got to focus on skills. You should also focus on not the superficialities. And I got to tell you, this is something that Steve Jobs really did before it was in vogue, which is he did not care about what school you went to, what gender you are, what your sexual orientation is, what religion, what color of your skin or your eyes. All he cared about was that you were great at what you did. And I think that is a very powerful attitude that of all departments in a company, HR should be carrying the flag for. It's like, to succeed as a company today, it's basically a war for talent. And in this war for talent, why would you limit the pool of applicants you can draw from with superficialities like your degree, where you got the degree, where did you work before? I mean, it's like saying, 5 years of prompt engineering is necessary to work at our company. Well, I hate to tell you, nobody has 5 years of prompt engineering because prompt engineering didn't exist until 2 years ago.
Yeah. No, I love that. As someone who grew up with no education myself and went straight into an organization, I kind of found like it gave me a bit of freedom, in the sense that I didn't have to conform to, I studied this and therefore I am that. I kind of came in with a completely open or literally growth mindset of wanting to absorb everything. Whereas I kind of realized some of the colleagues that came in from various universities was like, I am this and this is my skills and that's it. And it was very much fixed on that. And I was like, interestingly, that's kind of some of them, not all of them. It kind of was what was setting them back, because there was this sort of expectation that they deserve something now and that they have, they've done all of the learning they need in college, in there.
I think another consequence of an attitude like that is that, well, let's build this hypothetical. So let's say that, you're some kind of math prodigy, right? So, you're taking calculus at the third grade and, all this kind of stuff. So you're a math prodigy. And one of the consequences of that is like the math prodigy doesn't want to try art, or the math prodigy doesn't want to try music, or the math prodigy doesn't want to try surfing or hockey, because they're thinking, oh, if I try that and I'm not good at it, then people are not going to think I'm a prodigy anymore because I failed at something. And so it reduces risk taking, because they don't want to risk their image and even their mental capacity to think, I can try something and fail. It's okay.
Yeah. How would you say you've developed this personally, right? That even now you still have that hunger to try new things. Like when you say hockey, is that roller hockey or ice hockey?
Ice.
Ice hockey, great.
Ice.
So I grew up playing ice hockey. So I'm one of the very few people in the UK, and my co-founder Shane, we played ice hockey growing up. So I'm with you. Not so much the surfing. There's no waves where we are, but that's pretty like to start at that. Most people to be like, the idea of starting ice hockey, which is a very quite frankly dangerous and physical sport, is very daunting just for normal people, young kids even. Let alone jumping out. What is it that keeps you going and that pursuit?
Well, I took up hockey at 44. I took up surfing at 60, which is roughly 34 and 50 years too late, respectively.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just have this personality that, like, when I fall in love, I just go for it. And, I took up podcasting at, let's see, I'm 70 now. So I took up podcasting at 65. So, one pattern I've noticed is that I take up what my kids are into as opposed to make them take up what I'm into. Now, one of my sons is into what? Not hang gliding. What do you call that? Where you're like the flying squirrel. You put the thing on.
Wingsuit.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm not taking up wingsuiting because I draw the line there. Even my growth mindset has a limit.
Yeah, you've definitely raised some kids that are open to exploration. I love that you did that, by the way. I know it's a bit of a side tangent, but when Shane and I were, Shane, my co-founder, was my next door neighbor. So we grew up as kids, and we're still co-founders and friends to this day. But his dad learned how to play ice hockey so he could play with us.
Yeah.
So he was on the ice at 50 years old, playing with us, and falling, hurting himself, dislocated his shoulder. And he was always part of that. Whether, when we did karate, he did karate with us. And it was like, I never really appreciated it back then. By the way, my mum raised four kids on her own as a single parent. So Shane's dad was very much kind of like my dad in that way, that he took care of myself and his own son, Shane. But I think it's really cool that you do that. Like, I think
is he a podcaster now?
No, he's not a podcaster now. But he's what was his late? No, he's now he's in his rediscovering his rock music days. He's kind of like, now he's got the room set up with all of the guitars, and he's going back. He's like, I missed my childhood rock days, so he's having a He's going full.
Clearly, he's my kind of guy.
Yeah, he's going full circle. The other thing you mentioned.
Ask him if he wants to try surfing.
Yeah, he would. He's the kind of person that would definitely do that. One of the things, though, which in chapter 2 you talk about, which is really, I think, linked to growth mindset, is embracing vulnerability. Because many people struggle to, like you just said, take those risks. They're worried about failing. What are people going to think, and stuff like that. And therefore, and I'm sure this is why it's in the book, embracing vulnerability is so important to understand that. And I feel like it's a superpower for me to be to be vulnerable.
Well, if you take up hockey at 44 and surfing at 60, the flip side of that is you got to understand you're going to get hurt. You have to be willing to be hurt because it's going to happen. And I think if you were going to translate that to HR lessons, it's like saying that if you're going to support a growth mindset in an organization, you have to be willing to accept and even forgive failure. Because if you expect people to succeed every single time, every product to be perfect, everything everybody does is perfect, you're not embracing vulnerability. And, if people get fired for a failure, that just sends a message to the rest of the organization that failure is not tolerated. This is an organization that does not support learning. Now, I understand the flip side, which is, if you just let people keep failing and there's no negative consequence, that's also a bad message. But I got to tell you, there were lots of people in parts of Apple that failed that went to other parts of Apple and did great things. So failure, the opposite of succeeding is not failure in my mind. The opposite of succeeding is learning.
Yeah. You're 100% right. It's only a failure if you don't learn something from it. I think that's super important. Like Shane and I have a little quote and upstairs on the wall. It says "fail forward," and it's kind of always our mentality to constantly seeking discomfort, as we put it, and learning from that. As well. Same way we spent a lot of money on the first version of our Copilot many years ago. At the time, it felt like a failure, a huge failure. I mean, Shane, which was devastating to us as a small team and out of our own money. But now I look back at how quickly it allowed us to pivot and get to market based on all of the research and learnings we had. It was a huge success, actually. But sometimes in hindsight, you can't really see that as well.
Well, I'll tell you a story from the book, which is that when Christy Yamaguchi, the gold medal winner of figure skating and world champion, in her first competition, she finished 12th. So, and she went to her mom and she said, how come the girls who finished first, second, and third got ribbons and I didn't? And her mother said, because you finished 12th, Christy.
Yeah. But how do you come back from that, though? In that story with her and the conversation, what did she share with you about how she came back stronger?
She wanted a ribbon, and so she just, doubled down and started practicing longer and harder and all that, right? In a sense, I gotta say that failure is sometimes a good thing if it motivates you.
100%.
If it just makes you quit, that's another thing. Although I will tell you, if you were a figure skater and you finished 12th in your first contest and you quit, you were never going to be world champion anyway, because quitters never become world champions.
Yeah, no, that's true. How when people ask you that question of, how do you then overcome that fear? What do you say to people who say, oh, that's great, but it's scary. How do I overcome that fear?
Well, this is the answer to this question is that's why it's easier to be an author than a doer, because I can just pontificate about stuff and I don't actually have to do it.
Yeah.
I think you just need to get inspiration. That the Christy Yamaguchi story. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple. He started Next. He came back and, bada bing, bada bang. The next thing you know, Apple's the most valuable company in the world. And
yeah,
I think you just need to have these inspirations that, Michael Jordan got cut as a sophomore from his high school basketball team. It's over and over. Like, the path to being remarkable is not straight. and smooth. It is very indirect and
Yeah.
very ragged.
The way I look at it now is again, we went from being a digital media company to a SaaS business with an AI product, right? For me, the path is through intentionally failing forward and getting as many reps as possible. So I think this translated really well from me growing up playing ice hockey, right? When you first start playing ice, first you got to learn how to ice skate, right? Before, and you fall over thousands of times, right? And I relate that same into business. So you get up, you go again, and each time you get better. And the more reps you put in, the better you get, right? And the other thing was that I learned from ice hockey was the ability to be coachable, and constantly be learning and growing, and guess what? You lose games. I remember Shane and I going home in the backseat of his dad's car crying on the way home because we lost an ice hockey game, right? Like, devastated, right? But you came back more hungry. You trained harder. We trained in the off season. We both trained in the off season. Like when no one was, we were like, no, we're not gonna lose. And I think when I came into business, I just brought those same principles with me, if that makes sense. I didn't realize how important they were until later in my career, to be like, wow, actually that really helped translate into business.
Really? When I took up ice hockey, we put a sport court in the backyard, and we bought a net, and I literally took tens of thousands of shots in the backyard, like tens of thousands of shots, and I ended up with a very good wrist shot. But anyway, And I think that one of the lessons here for HR is that I swear to God that 90% of the battle is you just keep showing up. Mm-hmm. Because most people don't keep showing up, right? I mean, you try surfing one or two times, and guess what? Yeah, you're not a world-class surfer after two times, so you give up. And like, I've been surfing 11 years, and one of the biggest goals in surfing, in longboard surfing anyway, is you pop up and you take 4 steps and you get to the nose and you hang 10. Hang 10 is where your toes are hanging over the edge as you're in the water, okay? Mm-hmm. And that is kind of like really one of the biggest goals of longboarding. So it takes about 4 steps, and I've been surfing 11 years, and I can take 2 steps. So I think it takes 5.5 years for each step. So I got to go another 11 years to get 4 steps.
But that's the thing as well. Like, people want it quickly. That's another thing. People don't have the patience, I feel like, to, like, again, people see the success of what we've achieved. I'm like, yeah, it took 20 years, right? Like, you're just seeing the payoff. Like, now it's still hard. I used to be a skateboarder. The most difficult thing I've ever done is skateboarding. Literally to learn how to ollie first and foremost, and then to do a trick. You're talking about thousands of attempts, before you land.
To do an ollie.
To do an ollie, yeah, literally. And then now you're like, all right, let me try and do it up a curb, right? And so to do that, and so the idea that you're gonna start something or learn a new skill, and from day one you're gonna be like, it just works, is just so unrealistic.
How many times did you break your wrist or your arm?
Oh, I've broke a wrist. I've dislocated everything at this point. A collarbone. A lot. But yeah, jumping down staircases on skateboards is not advised.
That's vulnerability.
It's vulnerability. Yeah, I just started skating recently, and I realized, I can't believe I even did this as a kid. Like, now it's terrifying, the idea of doing that. One of the things I want to talk about as well, you talk about planting seeds, and I love this part, right, about diversifying experiences. Can you share some examples in the book of how this has benefited some of the people that you interviewed?
So I learned this first at Apple, that when we were coming out with Macintosh, we thought we had a spreadsheet database and word processing computer. And let's just say that we were kind of 0 for 3 there. And the market that really saved Apple was desktop publishing. So you used Macintosh to create documents and books and newsletters and magazines. But that was never the plan up front. And I learned this very valuable lesson that, you know what, yeah, you know, you think you know exactly which seed is gonna turn into a mighty oak, but really you really have no idea. And so you got to plant a lot of acorns to get a very few oaks. And I wish I could tell you that there's a way to, okay, here's 500 acorns. These are the 5 that will become trees. There's no way. You just got to plant 500 and, pray.
Yeah.
And I think that is true with many things. And you got to plant a lot of seeds. And if you're a young person listening to this, I'm telling you, while you're young, you're in the business of sampling.
Yes.
You should be trying a lot of different things because you really don't know, what's going to take root.
Yeah, I love that so much. I always say it to people that ask me that advice, like just taste as many things as possible. The idea that you just do one thing and just be like, that's it, is correct. So do it while you're young as well. And that help. I never thought I'll be doing this, but this is what I do every single day now. I get to have incredible conversations and built this business. And it's the same with Atlas. The application of the product from our first version is nothing like what people are using it for right now. Like how they're using our model to build onboarding agents, agents to do pre-boarding, agents to upskilling their frontline managers. Like, there's so many different use cases that people are using our product for that we didn't even envision ourselves. So the idea that you're going to put all your time and energy and investment into one seed is kind of crazy to be able to. And by the way, we have many seeds at HR Leaders that haven't grown outside of that, but we continue to plant. So I love that analogy, and I think what about people that feel like they haven't got the resources to pursue these goals? I think that's an interesting one.
Well, again, I come back to the answer that that's why it's easier to be an author than a doer, because I can just tell you to plant many seeds, and after this podcast is over, I'm done. Now they got to go do it. Well, first of all, to use the acorn analogy, there is a first pass. So you go and you collect a lot of acorns, you put them in a bucket of water, and the ones that float are dead. So you throw out all the floaters. So right there, you probably eliminate 80% of the bad ideas, right? So I'm not saying that every idea should be tried. But I am saying that rather than trying to make the perfect right decision, what you should do is make your decisions right. So once you take your best shot, make that decision right. Don't give up.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think one of the things that I've seen all the interviews and people I spoke to, when you look at people that are highly successful, is there's one side of the side is people with loads of ideas, right? And on the other side is you have the executors, right? And that's kind of, I would put myself in that bucket of, sometimes I actually even execute too fast and it gets me in trouble. So my co-founder my co-founder's like, okay, we have to have some idea and process and guardrails, whereas I'm always just running into the headwind and executing and learning and failing along the way, right? How do you get from idea to execution, right? At Apple, there must have been a million ideas that people had. How did that go from idea to, okay, execution on that?
Well, I think, the honest answer is you take a lot of shots and you pray. I wish I could tell you there is a way to specifically, figure out. Taking our favorite company, Apple, you think, oh, Apple, they're so smart. They focused on Macintosh and iPhone, iPod, iPad. Well, I hate to tell you, but there was Apple III, there was Newton, there was Lisa. Apple has had a lot of failures too. You never hear about them. So I don't want you to think that, Steve Jobs had a 1,000% batting average or whatever. You take a lot of shots. You just have to expect that there will be a lot of failures. And that's just the way it is. And I wish people would write about that, if you think that you can pick the right one the right time the first time, I hate to disappoint you. It ain't gonna be like that. And
Yeah.
the thing that we're very good at in Silicon Valley is we throw a lot of stuff up against the wall and about 1 out of 100 sticks, and then we go up to the wall and we paint the bullseye, and then we tell people, we hit the bullseye. Yeah, we knew that, what we should do at HR leaders is help people with onboarding and pre-boarding. Of course we knew that. We're so smart. Well, the fact of the matter is you tried a lot of things and those are the ones that succeeded. So you declared victory, right?
Yeah. I think I always hear Mark Cuban say, you only need to be right once. I think it's like a famous thing he always says. He's like, people haven't seen all of the failures that he's had. He's like, you only have to be right once. Right, like to really, when he talks about how he became very wealthy, as well. But so many people were so scared of the failure and taking the shot, then they kind of sit in the land of what if.
I would say to people in companies who are afraid to take the shot, there's a very good Chinese saying that that is like one of the cornerstones of my life, which is, you have to wait by the side of a river a very long time before the Peking duck will fly in your mouth. Which is to say, the Peking duck ain't going to fly in your mouth. You got to go out and kill the duck and cook it.
Yeah, love that. You'll be waiting a long time. Of all of those interviews that you've done, what are some of the sort of common traits or actions that really distinguish the truly remarkable leaders?
Well, in a sense, the book reflects, our discernment and our filtering of what really worked. And the book is divided into 3 pieces. It's growth, grit, and grace. And so growth is what we already talked about with Carol Dweck. Mm-hmm. Grit is the work of Angela Duckworth, where you have to keep persevering in the face of failure. And grace is when you are at the last part of your career and you realize that you have a moral obligation to pay it back. Mm. And I think those 3 stages are pretty much the definition of remarkable people. They have growth. They went through a lot of gritty things. And at the end, they want to pay back the world.
Yeah. When you think about things like grit, is that, are some people born with more a level of grit, or is it something that can be made and refined? And
I mean, I certainly have met people that are more gritty than other people, but I think it's a complicated question, because when you discover something that you truly love and you truly feel is important, I think your grit capacity grows up, right? Like, I really want to do this. I didn't care that much about surfing. I didn't care that much about hockey, but I really, really love golf. And so you're really, you're willing to put in the price, the cost, and do what you have to do. So I hope that, to some extent, grit can be built, because if we went around thinking, oh, I'm either gritty or I'm not, I think that'll lead to a lot of self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I'm not a gritty person. I can't really do this. And that's kind of the fixed mindset.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was asking that because I feel like many people that I've interviewed over the years that have more grit, a lot of times, it's not all the time, it's defined by their childhood and how and their surroundings and how they grew up, right? And unfortunately, I grew up in a home with a single parent with 4 kids, and it was tough. We didn't have any money. We struggled, and that built a level of resilience in me where when people were like, this is a really hard day, I'd be like, no, it's not. This is fine. This is great. to do that.
You use the word unfortunately, and it's easy for me to say this, but if you look back, not that you would ever wish this upon yourself or
Yes,
wish this upon
it is
people, but
fortunate. Yeah.
yeah, it may have been fortunate that, as opposed to what? You're like Donald Trump's son and you grow up in Mar-a-Lago and, you got Secret Service protecting you and you got billionaires sucking up to you. And maybe that's unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah, you are right. I think yeah, I used to be ashamed of that and very insecure about that. And then it kind of dawned on me maybe like 5 years into my career that the reason I was growing and moving through the business so quickly and it was because of that actually. So the things that I was ashamed of and embarrassed of, had insecurities about was actually the thing that made me determined, constantly have a growth mindset. Always on my first day, I remember the first decision I made, it was a sales role, is I refused to sit next to anyone but the top sales guy. That was my first demand when I joined the company, because I was like, I need to make money because I have no money in the company. I need to make money, and that guy makes the most money, so I have to. And they're like, no, there's no space. So I was like, no, I'm only sitting next to Cameron because I need to know how this guy is making 5 times more money than anyone else in the company. And I refused to do that, even though I just joined, which is pretty controversial. Like, who are you to make these demands? I was like, no, I need to do that, and I did to do that as well. So yeah, it's super.
A near-death experience, if it doesn't kill you, is a very valuable thing.
Yeah, let's not wish those on people though. Hopefully people don't have to learn that way as well. What about it in terms of making the most of opportunity? And I think the final chapter you talk about leaving no regrets, because I think there's a lot of research that shows people, always look back and say, I have a regret that I didn't take that opportunity, or I didn't start that company, etc. How do you see that plays into this?
Yeah, well, this is the work of my friend Daniel Pink, and he had this regret project, and he asked people to, talk about their regrets. And he found out that the two primary regrets people have is that they let some of their social relationships die, with their friends and family, that they should have kept up their relationship. And the other big regret is not that they tried too many things and failed, but the opposite. The big regret was, I should have tried that. I should have written that book. I should have tried that company. I should have, moved, and I should have tried these things, as opposed to I tried these things and I failed.
Mm-hmm. What is it that keeps Guy, yourself? How do you constantly disrupt Guy?
Well,
because you spoke up, we don't want, to be the, you don't want to be the next Kodak or Blockbuster.
Not.
How do you I mean this by the question, like, how do you constantly, all the books you've written, the organizations, the what do you do? What is it that you do to keep disrupting yourself?
At one very simplistic level, I have 4 kids, so I had at any given point 4 tuitions to pay. So I couldn't just be sitting around drinking tea all day. Okay, I couldn't wait for the duck to fly in my mouth. I had to go and kill the duck because I had tuitions to pay.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just got this personality that I always need to be doing something.
Okay.
If I'm like a shark, if I'm not moving, I'm drowning.
Yeah, I can relate to that. My wife, my wife just walked in the studio, and she always says to me, when's enough? Because like I'm always like, I get to a level of mastery in something and I get bored. So like, I grew up playing ice hockey, basketball, skateboarding, tennis, you name it. And I kind of got all the way to really high level. And my friends would be like, why do you always get to that really high level and then quit? Because I'm like, then it's boring. For me, it's like the learning and the failing and the getting better along the way, which is like my drug, if that makes sense, of choice to be able to do that. And
Well, I hope I get to the point where I'm bored with surfing.
Well, listen, when you drop me a message when you get 10 toes, it sounds like you've got another 10 years. It sounds like to go to get that.
Time is running out for me.
Time is running out. But yeah, but listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. Before I let you go, what would be sort of your parting advice, and where can people grab a copy of the book if they want to, or check out your work? Where's the best place for them to go?
Well, I mean, if you can't find my book, I would say that you probably don't know how to use a search engine. I mean, that's a good test. If the thing that's preventing you from being remarkable is you can't use a search engine to find my book, you're not a remarkable person.
Oh, that's great. That's a good, like, everyone's like, I have to find the book now, otherwise I'm not remarkable. That's great. That was genius. That was genius, guy.
Well, okay, but the other way, the other way to completely defeat my financial goals is that you just go to kawasakigpt.com, which is my personal LLM, and it has all my transcripts and all my work in it. And you can literally ask Guy any question, and honestly, you will probably get a better answer from asking Kawasaki GPT than you will get asking me in person. So, because Kawasaki GPT can remember every transcript, every word of every guest, and Guy Kawasaki cannot at this point.
Yeah.
So either buy the book or use the LLM.
So what I'll do next time is I'll just interview Guy GPT instead. And
it would be better.
It probably would already be surfing by now as well, right?
That's right.
It probably had 10 toes over the edge. But listen, on all seriousness, I appreciate you coming on the show. As I said, I've been following you on LinkedIn for a long time, and so super happy to finally get to meet you and interview you.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
All right. Thank you very much, and I wish you continued success.
Thanks.